Joe Bouchard. How are you, man?
Good. How are you?
I'm hanging in there. I'm hanging in there. I appreciate you coming on today and sharing your story with the audience.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Cool. Let me give the audience a brief description, a little bit info about you, who you are, so they can get a little bit of an understanding, broad perspective before we get into it. You're a doctoral student in psychology, actively pursuing advanced studies in human behavior and mental processes at Liberty University. Multi-instrumental record producer. You're a musician and a producer with a deep understanding of music creation and production. Published author and visual artist. You have a passion for creative expression across all mediums. Army veteran, former military service member and current local government official, bringing leadership and public service experience. You're a business leader and a podcast host of the From Nowhere to Nothing podcast, where you look at philosophers, abstract ideas, concrete cultural issues, and everything in between.
Yeah.
It sounds like a very fascinating podcast.
Yeah, we have a lot of fun. So we'll usually just look at one or two words each week, and spend an hour talking about them, looking at um, what philosophers have said about them in the past and kind of discuss them a little bit and ask some speculative questions about the future, that type of thing. So
Right, right on. Well, I only have one scripted question, and it's always the first one. And that is, where were you born, and what was life like as a kid for Scott Joel?
so I was born in Western New York. I still live there to this day. And I've had a really good life for the most part. I grew up. I had a brother who's 4 years older than me and a sister who is 3 years younger than me. So, um, you know, that there's some challenges there where you have any disagreements with your brother, he's big enough to beat you up. You have any disagreements with your sister, well, she's the youngest and the only girl, so your parents are going to take her side. So,
Right,
spent some time being invisible as the middle kid for quite a bit of my childhood, but I kind of like it that way. I'm somebody who's kind of an introvert, a little bit shy, like to sort of explore ideas and things more than being really social, so didn't work out too bad. But yeah, that was kind of the gist of it. My mom was a part-time nurse, and my dad he owned a business making signs, so he was an artist. He was a fantastic painter. He did all the hand painted all the signs in our area, and he uh, he eventually sold his business and became a pastor, but he still painted till the end of his life. And yeah. So that's kind of the basics.
right on. What part of Western New York are you at?
I'm in a small rural area, like just more cows than people. But like if you know where Buffalo and Rochester are, if you kind of drew a triangle between the two of them, you'd kind of hit where I'm at. Sort of
Okay,
yeah.
I've got my younger sister lives in Belmont.
Okay. Yeah. I think that's it's about 40 minutes from here, something like that. So
Okay, yeah, yeah. Her husband's family owns farmland there. So
yeah, it's about all there is.
yeah, right, exactly, exactly. How was elementary school for you? Was it something of interest, or did you have a lot of time where you were daydreaming and just wanted to stay off in the corner and be unnoticed?
Yeah, so I I did really well in school. I enjoyed it. It wasn't quite challenging enough. And so there's sort of two things that were happening. My older brother um was having some issues uh with other kids. Um
Okay,
and because him and I are a little bit different personality wise, right? I'm a little bit
oh yeah,
easygoing and he's a little bit, so he was having some
first
trouble with
child.
kids. Yeah. So he's having some problems with kids, and my mom didn't feel like I was being challenged enough, so she ended up pulling us kids out and homeschooling us. So I
Okay,
went to school until third grade, And then from third grade until I graduated high school, I was homeschooled by my mom. So and which was great. Because she was, she's somebody who's very passionate about learning. We even when we were in school, um, when we got home from school, that's now when the learning ended, right? She'd always take us to museums or on field trips and on things, and so she was always very passionate about learning. So she did a great job, and we got into the high school range where there's some advanced mathematics and stuff she wasn't real comfortable with. She'd hire tutors and things. Um, so yeah, it was. But yeah, up until third grade, I was in regular elementary school, and I got along with everybody just fine.
Okay. Did that experience of kind of getting pulled away from some friends that you had developed relationships with, did that affect you anyway, or were you able still to connect with them being homeschooled at that point?
Yeah, I think it was third grade. I was about 8 years old, and that's an age where uh there's kind of some transition going on anyways, I think,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
so there was a little while where I stayed in touch with my friends from school. But that was kind of the other part of it is we had like a homeschool sort of co-op thing. So a whole
okay,
bunch of families that did homeschooling would get together and we'd play sports and we'd do
right,
activities and that sort of stuff. So I kind of made new friends,
sure,
um, and some of them are still lifelong. I still hang out with some of them. And then there's other friends that I made in my career after school and things. So yeah, it sort of runs the gamut. I've got some friends that I've known since birth, essentially, that I
yeah,
went to school with, and some other ones that I made here and there and everywhere. So
gotcha.
yeah, it didn't. I guess it didn't have too big of an impact on me, probably because of the age.
Okay, okay. How about grandparents? Did you know both sides of your grandparents? Oh,
Yeah, yeah. So yep, my mom's parents both lived to be 90 years old.
oh wow.
Yeah, yeah. And so they died 10 years ago. So I was lucky enough to have grandparents right up into my 20s on her side. And then on my dad's side, we just celebrated his mom's 90th birthday last
Nice.
week. So 3 out of 4 got to 90. So there's some good genes there. His dad died of cancer about 15 years ago, and he was 80.
Okay.
Um, so yeah, I knew them all growing up, and yeah, they were all great.
Were there any of them creative at all in their life?
So I don't remember any of them doing anything creative, but I know that my grandma's mother was a professional piano player during the Great Depression. So
Okay.
um, yeah, it was hard to be a professional musician during that time period because nobody had any money to
Right.
pay anybody.
Yeah.
And so how hard it is to get paid as an artist today. Imagine in a time where nobody had any money, but she was able to she was a professional piano player able to make some money at a time when women didn't really work and musicians didn't really get paid. So yeah, I know that that was her story, but I don't really remember my grandparents. I don't remember any of them having any artistic streak really.
Okay. Okay. But there's a little bit of trickle down of the musicianship. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So my mom's, yeah, it would have been my mom's grandma, and then my dad was a painter. So both sides of the family have a little bit from either side.
And did he paint as a professional artist, or was it kind of just something extracurricular outside of the sign company?
It was both. Yeah. So
Okay.
the sign company, they sort of built their business around his artistic ability. A lot of his signs were detailed landscapes or wildlife scenes, that type of thing.
Okay.
My little town, our mascot is a sea serpent, and so if you drive around the town, all of the signs, the parking signs, everything have this sea serpent on it that he designed. That the design came from a comic book that he illustrated back in the 80s. So
Oh wow.
yeah, so yeah, he kind of mixed the two of them, right? At work, he did very artistic painting. He never, I don't think he ever really thought of it as much of a job, even though, it was sort of stressful because he owned owned the business, but
Right.
I know he was enjoyed doing it. But then even outside of work, he'd come home and he'd paint his own paintings, with different subject matter and things. So
Yeah. And when you saw that uh, being at home, him doing those things, did that draw your interest kind of immediately, or is it something that just developed a little bit over time?
yeah, it's really funny. You'd think that it would, uh, but I don't think that it really did. I see the same thing with my nephew. He's very artistic. He's probably better than I am, honestly, at 10
Okay.
years old. But it's one of those things that when you're a kid, I don't feel like I paid much attention to what my parents were doing, It's just like, they're those old people that I live with, I'm doing my own
Right.
thing. But
Yeah.
yeah, I was drawn really early to drawing. I love drawing. Started out with football players and then dinosaurs and kind of moved into my own little comic books and that sort of thing, and then progressed into painting and just trying out different mediums, whether it's acrylics or watercolors. Um, but yeah, it wasn't until I got to be a teenager where I started looking around going, oh yeah, I've been exposed to it my whole life, but now I'm just realizing that dad is like a really good painter, and then later on, him and I would actually start exchanging paintings. We do paintings and show them to each other and kind of get some feedback about, okay, well, what sort of technical details did you use to get this effect, and what would we have done different, that type of thing. So that was really fun to do. But
Okay. All right. Doing the co-opt scenario with homeschooling, I'm a little bit familiar with that. Um, did you have the opportunity to play sports kind of right off the bat, or is there a certain grade level where that became an option and you had to wait for it?
yeah, pretty much right off the bat, we were playing stuff. It depended on the ages. When I first started, so 8, 9, 10, it was a lot of kickball, wiffle ball, that sort of thing. And then as you got older, you kind of progressed to actual baseball, soccer, and
Right.
then a little bit of football. Uh, but yeah, there's some opportunities right off the bat.
Okay. And did you play all of the sports, or is there one
Yeah.
you're specifically drawn to?
No, I've always loved sports, and even in our little town, we have summer sports. That's actually where I kept in contact with some of my friends from school because they would play the summer league, and I'd play the summer league in baseball and soccer. So,
Okay.
yeah, yeah. So I played sports all the way up through. Um, I always loved playing. Um, Probably my favorite to play was soccer, which is my least favorite to watch, but you know, but
Yeah, it's a
soccer's
bit
just
slow
fun.
watching.
Yeah, yeah. But as a kid, it's just fun. A real energetic kid. I remember the coach would always put me in as the halfback because you have offense and defense and you have the halfback in the middle. So he's the guy that just runs the whole field the entire time. And he just put me in there and he wouldn't even sub me out. He just let me run the whole game. So I love playing soccer. But yeah, yeah, I've always been always loved playing sports.
Cool. That was my main sport too. That and basketball. I was a keeper for my entire career. Uh,
Nice.
and played indoor and outdoor up until 2017. So
Gotcha.
yeah, I
Yeah,
know what it is. It's a whole lot different watching it than it is playing it.
right, right. Yeah. It was just summer league. So I started out as a keeper, but I got pulled because I get bored back there. So whenever the team got down and actually took a shot on me, I'd put the ball down and I just dribble all the way down the field. I scored 2 goals as the keeper, and the coach
Nice.
said, "No, we're not doing that. Like we got to let other kids touch the ball." He said, "We're going to put you in a halfback." But yeah, it got a little boring back there. So
Right,
yeah,
for sure. I can imagine. Once you're getting closer to high school age, um, obviously the body starts changing, the mind starts changing, different things like that. Is there any type of scenario where you're starting to feel some angst toward being homeschooled versus being in a particular classroom on a daily basis?
yeah, yeah. It's one of those things. My wife and I talk about it quite a bit, where you go through these phases, right? When everybody, when they're a kid, is this kind of unique special little being.
Yeah.
And then you get to be about middle school to probably mid 20s age range, and you just want to fit in. You just want to have a place and fit in. And then you get to be mid 20s, 30, somewhere around there, and you realize that like fitting in sucks, and being a cool adult is all about having all that unique stuff that you had when you were a kid.
Yeah.
So yeah, I certainly went through that phase where you know, I I didn't have any qualms about being homeschooled. It was great. I loved it. But yeah, getting to be a teenager, you know, and starting to look around and going, oh well, there's not much of a pool for people to date. There's not much of a pool for, you know, you go, ah man, if I was in public school, things would just be so much, I'd have more opportunities to do things like date or play, organize sports, that type of stuff. And so yeah, there's a period where it's kind of depressing.
For sure. With your brother being older, and you said he was having some difficulty just as the first child. Did you see any of that um, eh, being homeschooled kind of together? And we're looking at that from the perspective of I understand what he's dealing with and going through, or was it like, man, why doesn't he just stop what he's doing?
I think that was it because as the middle child, I was always trying to, you know, just want everybody to get along, just want everything to go smooth. And
Right.
so, and he was older, so a lot of that stuff that I think he was experiencing that 4 years from then, I would also experience and would appreciate. Being younger, I didn't appreciate it at the time. So I
Okay.
just thought, what's he making such a big deal about? Like, what's so hard about following the rules and listening to what mom and dad say and all that sort of stuff? So
Yeah.
yeah, I certainly didn't recognize it too much when I was younger. And even when I got to be his age, we dealt with things a little bit different. I think that both him and my sister um, were highly emotional people. They kind of take over after my dad that way. Whereas me and
Okay.
my mom, we're both pretty stoic German people. So
Gotcha.
it was the kind of thing where even when I was a teenager and I didn't really appreciate what my parents were thinking, I go, oh well, rather than fighting them on it, I'm just going to try to sneak around and hope they don't find out, that type of thing. So,
Right.
um, yeah, so we had different ways of dealing with things. But
Sure. When you are getting in again into high school age, um, is there opportunity for you to start working, or are you thinking I need to do something to make my own money so I can be a little bit freer within this environment?
yeah, it was funny. My I remember my dad. It happened to my brother, and then it happened to me too. When I was 12 years old, he goes, "Yeah, you should start working." Oh, okay. So, and it wasn't anything big deal. Basically, my mom loaded me up with the push mower in the minivan and drove me down to the local lake that we have and just kicked me out and said, all right, walk around, see who needs their lawn mowed. And so I went knocking door to door. And, all the it turned out to be a great gig, right? Because all these people are
Yeah.
old, retired people with these tiny little postage stamp lawns. And so they pay you $25 to mow for 5 minutes, the lawn. And then after that, they invite you in for cookies and lemonade and stuff.
Right.
And so yeah, I just walked around, mowing lawns, getting paid, and I did that for several years until another young and upcoming kid, was looking for a part-time job, and I passed it over to him once I had another job at that point. But yeah, 12 years old, started mowing lawns, and then 14, uh, my one friend got me a job dishwashing at a local restaurant, and then when I was 17, I went and started working at McDonald's. Full time. Well, I started working at McDonald's, and then 3 months in, they made me a manager at
Okay.
17.
Yeah.
And so I started working full time, and I actually got them in trouble because in New York State, you can't work 40 hours until you're 18 years old. So they had to modify some things for me. But yeah, so that was kind of my early career arc, and I've been managing people ever since. So almost
Okay.
20 years now. Um, but yeah, so very early on, and then I remember looking back and giving my dad some crap about it because me and my brother both had to start working when we were 12, and I don't think my sister got her first full-time job till she was like 23, living at home and stuff. So
Oh wow.
gave him a hard time about it, but
Yeah, I can imagine that that was definitely a bit of contention.
Yeah.
The the concept of working at that age, I think for boys is kind of a natural progression, especially if you want things, right? And you're in that homeschool type setting. It's like, okay, you got to get out and work. You got to have the money to be able to get the things that you want to do. Because a lot of times with homeschooling, you don't always have the extra cash flow that's coming in.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it was kind of funny because, so my dad told me I had to get the job at 12, and at 12 you don't have anything to spend money on. So like I just sat around collecting money, and I it sort of blew some of my friends' minds later, because by the time I could drive, I had thousands and thousands of dollars saved up. Like, where did all this money come from? I go,
Holy
well,
cow!
I've been working since I was 12, and I never had anything to spend any money on. So
Right,
yeah, it started early, um, with financial responsibility, but yeah.
that's great. Was that something that your dad instilled in you as a business owner?
Yeah, yeah, because he was very good with finances, and I think that did stem from the early business, because he started that, I want to say, right about the time I was born.
Okay.
So it had been him and my mom and my brother, and then I was born, and the business was just starting. And I remember my mom likes to tell the story where one day she thought she'd do something nice, and so when the business was just starting up, a year or two in. So she went through the couch cushions, looked all over the house, and collected just enough change to buy a pizza for dinner. And my dad came home and was just livid. He couldn't
Oh,
believe that she wasted the money on pizza when
oh
they
man.
when things were so tight.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so he was very very financially responsible, and yeah, definitely passed that on. And even after he sold the business and um, started as a pastor, he was always in charge of doing the books for the church and all that. So yeah,
Okay. And did that take place during high school era, or was that after?
yeah, that would have been yeah, right around high school.
Okay. Um, with him making that shift, was that another scenario where you're like, oh wow, what's happening here? The dynamic of the family is going to change.
Yeah, it really was. Because it was shortly before high school. So I would have been early teens maybe, or 12, 11, somewhere in there.
Okay.
And he'd done really well for himself. So we were used to, all right, hey, we're going to go out to eat. Hey, we're going out to the movies. Hey, we're doing this, that. We're going to go visit grandma in Florida and go to Disney World and this sort of thing.
Yeah.
And so when and again, he was very financially responsible, and he sold the business for a good sum of money, but he kind of knew that he wasn't going to make any money as a pastor. So what he had was going to have to last him the rest of his life.
Yeah.
And so things definitely got a lot tighter from that point on, where we didn't do any of that stuff anymore. And
Right.
and it was fine. I think that, none of us, I never felt like we were missing anything really, but there was definitely a notable shift where you go, oh, this stuff that we used to do, we don't do any of that anymore. So
Yeah. Yeah. For sure. Yeah, that's definitely a change in income levels, especially in rural areas, going from owning your own business to pastoring a church. That's quite a bit of a shift in income structure there.
yeah, it definitely was. And I think the part of the reason, uh I never really thought twice about it is because I just knew that, this is what he wanted to do,
Yeah,
and you go, okay, well, if you've worked hard your whole life and done all this stuff, and now you're in a position where you can pursue what you want to do, then I'm not going to hold it against you, that,
yeah,
hey, I don't get to go out to eat or go to the movies. It's all on your dime anyway. So.
right. Was faith and church, was that a big part of your family's story growing up, as well as having the homeschooling situation?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's kind of interesting for the first, 6 or 8 years. It wasn't really. We didn't go to church or anything. Sunday morning we might have like a little, dad might read a couple scriptures or something like that. But for the most part, we just kind of lived sort of normal lives. And then it was about 6 or 8. They decided they wanted us kids to go to church. So we went, and then it was really just a year or two later where the pastor of the church we were at asked my dad if he would come on as an assistant pastor,
Okay.
and he said yes. And from that point on, yeah, it was a pretty central point. We went every week, and I played guitar, bass, drums. That's where I got a lot of honed a lot of my chops doing with different musical instruments. Was at church.
So learning music and stuff like that started early for you in
You
terms of
know,
age.
yeah, it's kind of relativistic. You hear a lot of people talk about learning instruments, and a lot of them are talking about, oh yeah, I was playing drums when I was 4, or I learned guitar when I
Right.
was 6. So I took some piano lessons when I was like 8 and didn't like it, and so I didn't have to go. And then the next time I picked up an instrument was at 15, and
Okay.
it wasn't in church. It was with I had 3 friends that none of us played anything, and we just decided we were going to start a band, right? And
Okay.
so we just picked out, all right, you'll play drums, you'll play bass, and I got guitar. For the only reason being that my older brother did play guitar, so he had one.
Gotcha.
So I started practicing on my brother's guitar when he wasn't using it, and we um, started playing together, and sucked for a bunch of years, and then started to get kind of good, and played some local battle of the bands, and recorded on a cassette tape, if anybody remembers what one of those are.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you know just when we were starting to get pretty good, when I was 19, my drummer got married really young, and my bass player moved out of state to go to college. And so I didn't want to stop playing. So I took almost all the money I'd made up to that point, and I went to Guitar Center and I bought a drum set and a bass and an audio interface, and I bought all this equipment, and I bought computer parts and decided I'm going to learn how to build a computer. So I learned how to build a audio computer, and I put up some soundproofing, and I taught myself how to play the instruments, and I taught myself how to do the software side of it, and started putting out my own music. So um, yeah, it was
So you're
really.
doing this at 16?
What was that?
You're doing this at 16?
So that was at 19.
19.
Yeah,
Okay.
that was when the band broke up. So
All right.
yeah, 19 was when I just decided I'm going to do it all myself, and just kind of had to teach myself how to do it. I bought all the stuff on the hope and the whim that I'd be able to figure it out. So
Right. So, and did you have, at that point, were you just learning from the internet, or were you learning from somebody around you, or were you just figuring it out on your own by sound?
mostly figuring it out. So I think I had 2 guitar lessons.
Okay.
Um, and then from there on out, uh, figured it out. If I ever got stuck, I'd ask my brother, because he played guitar. He's a really, really good guitar and bass player. Um, but we didn't really play together or anything like that. And so if I was stuck, he'd help me out, but we didn't really do much else besides that. So other than that, I was basically just sort of learning through um, figuring it out, and a little bit of the internet. This is still early stages of the internet, so there's not a whole lot out there. But you could find like tabs, that
Right.
type of thing, and sort of tabbing some things out. But
Right.
yeah, mostly just figuring it out.
That's impressive. That's impressive being able to do that and have the thought process to do that. Very interesting. Um, Brain function, that type of thing, uh, to where you're diving into it without really any reference point other than your brother. And understanding too, I don't just need the instruments, I need to create the recording components with the computer, and have the ability to make sure that I capture everything. Um,
Yeah, it's a little surprising looking back on it, because it certainly took a long time, and there's certainly a number of things that if I did have somebody teaching me, I wouldn't have spent so many years doing it the wrong way. There could have
Right.
been some shortcuts. It could have been a lot easier.
Yeah.
But yeah, figuring it out, it reminds me, like I said, of my nephew who with the visual arts, where it's the same thing with him. Nobody teaches him to do it, but he just sits down and he looks at stuff and he draws and he paints and does these things, and all of a sudden he's just getting really good. And the guy's never had an art lesson. It was sort of the same way with me, but with music. I still wouldn't say I'm really good. I'm not a good musician, um, but yeah, just self-taught. Just sitting down, listening to things, and then sort of trying to recreate them, and then make my own stuff. So
Okay. Um, Getting the job at McDonald's and moving into a leadership role so early on, what did that do for your self-esteem at that point in time?
yeah, that's an interesting question, right? Because I think that you know, being relatively sheltered. And of
Right.
course, I wouldn't say that too much because, like I said, with between the co-op and the church and actually going to school and all the stuff that my mom had us doing, I had quite a bit of exposure. But, in terms of a work, situation, a job, I really had no barometer for if I was a good worker, a bad worker, anything like
Yeah.
that. So yeah, to show up to a place and, just 3 months later have them hand you the keys and say, "Yeah, you're in
Yeah.
charge of 15 people every day."
Yeah.
Um, it was a bit of a boost to self-esteem where you go, "Oh, okay, well, obviously these people see some value in me and not just some potential, but after this short of a period of time, right? I'm barely done learning, training on everything to
Right.
say that you're good enough to run the place was it was a good feeling. It was a good it was a good yeah, it was just I guess it was just a good feeling, and it does help you execute a leadership function better when you have that kind of self-esteem. If you're
Yeah.
always walking around questioning whether or not you can do the job, then that's half of being a leader right there. You have to know you can. So
Yeah. Exactly. With all of the At that point, with all of the different employees that are working with you, coming from different family environments and different things like that, and having that leadership role, was there anything that was really eye opening to you about uh, being in a position of leadership at that young age, and then also to the environment that all of the employees are coming from? Did you see anything that was like shocking or was interesting that you wanted to know more about within that person's life?
yeah, there was certainly I'd say on the positive side, there was a lot of music.
Okay.
There's a CD player in the back that all of the dishwashers and the line cooks would share, and there's always new CDs coming in that people were playing of stuff. That's the thing. It's like I really don't know a lot of musicians, even to this day, right? Because I got such a late start with music, right? I didn't start till I was 15, so I didn't really listen to a whole lot before then. And so then from 15 to 19, me and my friends had a band, but we were mostly kind of writing our own songs. We weren't doing covers.
Yeah.
So I was listening to guitar. I was listening to some guitar players on the side to learn how to play guitar, like Stevie Ray Vaughan, Jimi Hendrix, a lot of blues guys.
Okay.
But that was kind of my exposure. It was like
Yeah.
Stevie Ray Vaughan, Jimi Hendrix, and then playing songs at church.
Right.
So to start, at 17 at McDonald's and just hear all of this different music that was out there, go, oh wow, there's really cool stuff that
Yeah.
that is out there. And so that was kind of the positive aspect of starting starting to work there. And of course, I've always been a pretty open-minded person, so it wasn't a shock to me that people had all kinds of different lifestyles and things, and it didn't really bother me. None of that really rubbed me the wrong way, um, or really shocked me much. But uh, yeah, it was different to be in a spot. It was like the first time in my life where, um, I was telling people older than me what to do. Your whole life, people older than you are telling you what to do,
Yeah,
and now you get to
yeah,
a spot where you go, oh, okay, well, I've got to tell this 40-year-old guy that he needs to do this thing differently.
right.
So yeah, those are kind of the changes, I guess.
What was that dynamic like for you, being younger and having to tell somebody older they had to do something a certain way?
It went really well for me. Um, I think because of my personality. Again, my podcast is a philosophy podcast, right? So it's about
Yeah,
basically, looking at things closely and critically reflecting on them and realizing that everything is much more complex than you think it is, and you know much less than you think you do. And so that's an attitude I've had my whole life. So coming in, not only being younger than everybody, but also being newer than a lot of people.
yeah,
I was always willing to hear reasons for why people were doing things the way they were or why they couldn't do something a certain way. I was always very hands on. So if somebody was trying to explain to me why something was difficult, I'd say, okay, well, show me and let me try. And, sometimes I'd be able to understand and help them out. Sometimes I'd be able to kind of look at the problem in a different way and give them a new solution to help them be a little bit quicker. Um, but no, it didn't really, it wasn't too bad. I think that, a lot of the older people knew that, uh, I wasn't letting it go to my head. I wasn't going to be a cocky little prick about, you know, being
right,
put in charge.
right.
I was always willing to learn, willing to hear people's problems, willing to help out. Um, and so really through my whole life, I've had very few, issues being in charge. So I'm
Okay.
lucky.
I can relate to that a bit. My first job was in fast food, uh, but I tried to get a job with the company that I worked for at 15. And because of our state laws here in Michigan, they were like, "Nah, you gotta come back in a few months." And so, um, and then within 2 years, I was in a supervisor position, and then just kind of moved up from there. So I understand what that perspective is like, having to have people under you that are you're responsible for, making sure that they're doing their job, all that kind of thing. With getting towards the end of high school, and being homeschooled, are you on a standard trajectory in terms of grade levels, or is it a little bit more accelerated so you might have been able to graduate early and finish up early?
Yeah, it got accelerated because so I actually started behind. My birthday's early September. So it's already kind of like on that edge. Well, do you start when you're a really young 5-year-old or a young 6-year-old?
Right.
And so I always like to tell people that I failed preschool
Okay.
because I pretty much did, right? I went to preschool when I was 4. And at the end of the year, the teacher came up to my mom and she said, he's really smart. She said, but he hasn't said a single word the entire year to anybody.
Oh wow.
and and
Okay.
so my mom made the decision that she'd send me through a second time. And the second time went better, but long story short, I didn't start kindergarten until I was 6. And that always kind of bugged me.
Yeah.
My brother, who has a birthday at the same time, he's late August. Um, he went uh, to kindergarten early. And so we have different perspectives on it because he always felt like he wasn't prepared for what was going on, whereas I always felt like I don't know, it's like Adam Sandler and Billy Madison, where he's sitting at the desk with his knees between his ears because he didn't know he's too big. I always felt like I was just too old to be in the classes, because I was a year older than everybody.
Yeah.
um so yeah, when my mom pulled me out, part of the reason, like I said, she pulled me out is because she felt like I wasn't being challenged enough. So she sort of tailored my curriculum uh to my ability level. So there's some things that I was much better at than others. And so she let me sort of she sort of tailored it to me and let me move ahead at my own pace. So by the time I was 17, I was uh mostly graduated. So when I was 17, she had me taking a couple classes. It was the advanced math with a tutor, and then I was taking some college courses at our community college. Um, but by the time I was 17, I was finished up. So I went from being a year behind to kind of a year ahead. So
Gotcha. Okay. With taking the college courses, was it courses that were just gen ed courses, or was it specific to something you thought you wanted to do at that point?
so at that point, it was general ed courses. So she said, she sent me to kind of get the basics out of the way. So that was another bit of an eye-opening experience, right? Because it's like, okay, well, last time I was in a real classroom, I was in third grade.
Right.
Now you're going back at 17. It's kind of the same thing like going to McDonald's to get a job where you go, okay, I don't really know where I stand, right?
Yeah.
Because sure, my mom's been saying I've been doing great, in school for the past 9 years, but that's my mom. Like she's not a principal. She's not a, we have to take standardized tests in New York
Yep.
State.
Yep.
So that, should be a reliable indicator of where you're at. But you just didn't know until you got to college, like, am I really as smart as my mom thinks I am?
You're right.
So it was again, it was a pleasant surprise when, yeah, I did all right, So, start out with the general ed stuff first, and then I ended up graduating from community college with an associate's degree in criminal justice.
Okay. Interesting. Was there a reason that you thought law enforcement or potentially being a lawyer would be something that you would want to go into?
Not really. I think it was just sort of little kid fantasizing to some extent. Like
Okay.
you're a little kid, you like playing soldier, doing that type of stuff. And so at first, when I was 17, I tried to join the military,
Okay.
and my dad talked me out of it. He said, listen, he's like, I understand this is what you want to do, but you're young. He said, go to community college. He said, get your 2 year degree. If you still want to go in after that, I won't try to stop you. I'll let you go. So I
Uh,
agreed to it. I said, okay. So I went to community college and just figured, well, if I'm going to go into the military after I get out of college, then criminal justice will probably be a degree that will help me out with military experience to get a job in law enforcement, right?
right. Right.
Um, I discovered after getting out of the army that law enforcement wasn't really a job that I was interested in doing,
Okay.
but those were sort of my fantasy projections into the future at that point. So that was my reasoning.
Sure. Okay. Um, with being in the band and having that thing going on for you guys, doing some Battle of the Band events, were there any other venues that you guys ventured into to play your original music at all?
Yeah, we played anywhere people would have us. So we did different picnics, we did graduation parties, we did like a social event type things. So yeah, we played pretty much at talent shows. We did talent shows, practice playing my guitar solos behind my back and that type of thing. So
Okay.
yeah, we played anywhere that people would have us.
And what type of genre did you guys lean towards?
Weird.
Okay.
We were weird. Yeah, my music now, what I make now, you wouldn't really associate with what we were doing then. The stuff I do now, I call it alternative rock. It still kind of spans the gamut a little bit because I'll kind of go back and forth between on one end, kind of like a soft dream pop type of thing,
Okay.
and on the
Yep.
other end, pretty close to metal. Um,
Okay.
so kind of within that span. But we were kind of influenced by at the time we were all listening to funk music. So I was really into James Brown, and my drummer was really into Stanton Moore, who was a jazz drummer,
Okay.
and so yeah, it was kind of like a funk jazz fusion type thing.
Okay.
It was instrumental. None of us sang at that point. So yeah, just sort of a weird funky uh, jazz fusion type deal.
Right on. Right on. Was Parliament Funkadelic in the spectrum of view?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. Yep. So yeah, that was the kind of stuff we were playing, just instrumental, and yeah, nobody was paying us to play places, but they would let us, so we would. And
Yeah.
it's kind of like, a lot of people, I mean, were we getting much less attention than people who were playing covers that were really well rehearsed? Not really. You go to any of these places, a lot of people aren't paying attention. They're just talking and doing their own thing. So,
Right.
but we just like getting out and playing.
That's cool. That's cool. With getting to the end of the 2 year experience with community college and looking at the military again, was it an immediate decision? As soon as you got finished, went straight to the recruiting office, or was there any lull in between that?
There was a lull. Getting my 2 year degree in criminal justice, the inkling was already there that maybe this wasn't what I wanted to do with my life. Our main professors there were cops who, um, they're not pulling any punches, so they're showing you pictures in class of, an old lady that slipped in her bathtub and has been decomposing for 3 weeks,
Oh,
or
geez.
a 10-year-old that hung himself from his swing set, this type of stuff. You go, man, is this really what I want to do on a day-to-day basis? I don't know.
Right, right.
So I got out and, was sort of thinking over my options. And that was when I was 19. So that's when the band broke up and I bought all the musical equipment. So between 19 and 23, that's really when a lot of my musical development happened, right? That's when I taught myself to play drums and keyboard and started experimenting with singing, and writing songs that had vocals in them and getting the production aspect of it down, that type of thing.
Yeah.
But I got to be 23 and, as cool as all that stuff was, I go, yeah, but the thing is, I love going to school. Like, I love learning. And, I'm working at McDonald's. Like, this isn't what I want to do my whole life.
Yeah.
And so, what's the next step? And I thought, well, I still think about joining the army, still think about that. And I know that if I do that, I can pay for school too.
Right.
So I ended up joining the reserves. I figured that was kind of a nice compromise, rather than going full bore into it. I could join the reserves. I could go back to college for free, get that experience under my belt, kind of build up a resume, kind of transition into a new career field. So 23 is when I joined the reserves.
Okay. And in terms of environment, was that a shock for you?
That was a shock. Yeah, yeah, because I again, being a kid who was always pretty easygoing and quiet, and then growing up in the environment that I had really faced very little um, opposition, or at least I guess I'd say like aggressive opposition. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
you know, my dad was an emotional dude, but like he was never abusive in any way. So
Yep.
um, so I, showing up at basic training the first day and you got guys screaming in your face and all this stuff's happening. It was a little bit of a shock. It was, and it's one of
Right.
those things my grandpa said it and it sums it up perfectly, right? Joining the military is a $1 million experience that I wouldn't give a wooden nickel to repeat. So I'm glad that I did it. I really am, and I think there's a lot of things about it that did um, made me a man, and maybe not in a typical way that many people would think, but it gives you the confidence, right? Anything else you run into in life, you go, oh, this isn't difficult compared to what I've done before.
Right.
It's like I remember not sleeping for 4 days straight and having to run around and getting fed a teaspoon of rice and doing all this stuff, and you go, anything else is easy after that. And I think that's the most valuable part of the whole experience, was everything else is easy after you go through that. um and so there's that aspect of it. But yeah, it was quite a shock.
And for the audience that may not understand what the reserve structure is in terms of just full on military service, what did that look like at that point in time?
Yeah.
Starting.
Yep. So not a lot of people know this, but every army contract is 8 years long. Doesn't matter what, but it's split up into active and inactive time. So if you join The active military, usually you're doing 4 years active duty, and then you do 4 years as an inactive reservist, which means you don't have to do anything, but if something happens, they can call you up. In reserves, the typical contract is 6 years active reserves, 2 years inactive reserves. And so that's what my contract was. So for 6 years, um, so first off, I went to basic combat training and to AIT, which is job training, the same way that any other soldier does. So
Okay.
it doesn't matter if you're an Army Ranger or if you're computer technician, whatever it is, everybody goes to the same basic training. And everybody goes to job training of some type. So after those 10 weeks, came back, and then for the next 6 years, once a month, go for a weekend to do some training, and once a year for 2 to 3 weeks, you get sent to somewhere to do more in-depth job training. So, yeah, so between 23, 29, I was active reserves.
Okay. And did they put you into a specialty role at that point, to where your training was for a specialized uh, division or unit?
Yeah, so the company that I was in was a quartermaster company, so it's a support company, and there was like three jobs you could have. You could be a cook, you could be a mechanic, or you could be a logistics guy, so like a warehouse worker. Um, so I went the warehouse worker route, um, and when I took the ASFAB, which is basically the intro test for it's like in like the intro job test for the Army. Um, the guy pulled me aside. He goes, "Listen," he's like, "You got a 98." He's like, "You can do whatever you want." He's like, "You should probably join the Air Force and do something that's cushy that pays well." And I said, "No, I want to shoot guns." So I went into the Army, and yeah, I regret it a little bit, but so that 98, in the warehouse, they have specialized jobs as well. So I was a 92 Alpha. That's the job code. But then because of my high scores, they made me a Romeo 1, 92 Alpha Romeo 1. So my job was driving one of the biggest vehicles in the Army. It's this huge four-wheel thing that picks up railroad car boxes from the top, and you
Okay.
can put them on trucks or on railroad cars. So that was kind of my job specialty. I had a lot of fun doing it. It was great. I got two medals for doing the job in training exercises for different reasons. So yeah, it was a good time.
Oh, nice. The That's interesting in terms of the mentality that I'm seeing across your storyline, where you kind of got held back because of your age when you were born, and then you were able to excel through homeschooling, graduate early. You get into a job position where immediately you're starting to excel, go to the military, and then you do well on your entry exams and everything, and they're like, hey, you can kind of do whatever you want here because you just scored so high. Again, what when you heard that information from that leader in the military, was that kind of the same sensation that you had when the uh, manager at McDonald's said, hey, we want to put you into a supervisory role?
Yeah, it was similar because you know, I what happened was I went to take the ASFAB, and I asked the recruiter, I said, "Hey, should I study for this or anything?" He goes, "Nah, nah, it's not a big deal." Well, I get there, and before the test starts, I'm talking with people and I'm asking around, and hey, I hear people talking. I go, "Wait, you studied for this?" They go, "Yeah, they have like a whole pre-course that you do to figure, to do it right." Like
Yeah,
I go, "Oh man, I didn't study for it at all." And not only did I not study for it at all, but I graduated like 5 years ago. So I don't remember, a whole lot of what happened. So
yeah,
I was pretty surprised at how high I scored. But so yeah, to be told that, yeah, you could pretty much do whatever you want. I go, wow, especially considering the fact that I didn't really study for it.
yeah.
It felt good. So yeah, and some of these experiences build up to where I'm at now, between um, that experience and yeah, being put in charge at McDonald's and these sorts of things, and just my early experiences, with my mom, her always just trying to make everything interesting, and
Yeah.
fun. I that's when I realized, that I wanted to continue on the academic journey. I go, this is something that I'm good at. It's something that I'm interested in, so I want to keep working on it.
Right. Did the music carry into the military at all? Were you able to connect with some other guys there that were into music and maybe put something together?
Well, that's really funny because I almost did. So our reserve base shared we shared the building with one other unit, and the other unit was an army band.
Okay.
So they found out about me and they said, "Hey, we want you to come audition for the band." And so I did, and the audition went well. Um, but it was my first experience with playing cover songs. And so I showed up. They said, "All right, we're gonna, you can play guitar. Here's the music." I played with them. It went great. I said, "Yeah, what do you think? Do you want to swap units and come over here and, because basically what they would do is they'd travel around to different areas and play in school gymnasiums at recruiting events and that type of
Yeah.
thing."
Yeah.
And I told them I'd have to think about it, but I never got back to them because when I was sitting there playing the cover song, I go, this isn't what I signed up to do. Like I'm just
Right.
I'm not somebody who, well, what a lot of people don't know about me, and people are sort of shocked to find it out, is like I don't even play my own songs more than once usually. Because a lot of time people will listen to my albums online, they'll go, "Hey, what were you playing in this song?" And I go, "I don't remember." I go, "The only time I ever played that song was when I was recording it in my studio, and then I never played it again." So I always like to do something new. I'm not somebody who is a big believer in practicing over and over again, right? I think the
Right.
point of practice is to do something different and new, not to just do the same old thing over and over again. So
Okay.
so I was really unenthused by playing cover songs, other people's songs. So I continued with my normal military stuff, and on that side, with the cooks and the warehouse workers and the mechanics, um, there's a couple of musicians. There's actually a guy that I still collaborate with to this day. We did a cover of "Sunshine on My Shoulders" by
Okay.
Bob Denver. So I'd had a dream where Jack Johnson and Norah Jones were doing a cover of that song, and I woke up and I go, "Wow, that'd be really cool." But they're not going to do it, so I've got to do it, right? So I did my
Interesting.
best impression of Jack Johnson uh, playing "Sunshine on My Shoulders," and he did some background vocals on it. And there's a girl that I used to work with who did some background vocals on it. And him and I, we also did a little challenge where we each gave each other the first line of a song that we had. So I wrote just the first line of a song and gave it to him, and he wrote just the first line of a song, gave it to me, and then it was our jobs to write the rest of the song based off of it, right?
Right.
And so I I released the song that I wrote off of his one line. That's Carnival Ride. So Carnival Ride, that's yeah, my good friend from the army, Jeff Goodrich, he wrote the first line of that, and then I finished up that. So yeah, there's still people, and then even people that didn't play music, there's a lot of music lovers that um really were very supportive of me. They'd buy all my stuff and spread the word, and provide inspiration and ask
Right.
about different things. So yeah, there was certainly some contribution, but it's just funny, not in the way you'd think, especially given the fact that I was, offered the ability to play in the army band.
Yeah, for sure. That is interesting. Um, is there, other than the fact that you're not doing it to get better or good at it, is there another reason why you don't continue to play the songs you create?
Not really. And like some of them I do. Some of them I like for like certain practice warm-ups.
Yeah.
I've
Yeah.
got a particular one off a Unicorn of the South China Sea that has a really complex rhythm pattern with the right hand. And so just to kind of warm up, I'll play through the first bars of that. And I've got another one that is a really fast guitar solo. So that's good for warming up the left hand.
Okay.
So I'll
Yeah.
still run through some of those things sometimes. Um, but I'm just not somebody who really looks backward very much, I guess. I like doing new things. I like making new things. And so, I like to go back and listen to those albums sometimes. But I don't really have a compulsion to go back and play them. And as a matter of fact, um, I had an offer 2 years ago by a guy who called me up and said, "Hey, I've got three guys that um want to tour. Like we want to play your stuff. We'll be your band. Like, do you want to go out and tour and play your music?" And I said, "No." And they go, "Really?" I go, "Yeah." I go, "I've been in a band. Like I don't like hauling amps around. I don't like standing in front of people. I go, I like sitting in my studio and recording new songs. That's what I like doing, you know." So a
Right.
lot of people, I drive a lot of people crazy for that reason. A lot of people go, "Man, you've been handed some of these opportunities and you've turned them down." But that's the whole point. Like that's what life is, and that's what a lot of people don't see. I mean, there's been plenty of famous musicians that have ended up killing themselves, right? Because they were unhappy, right?
Yeah.
So being famous doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be happy. And so knowing who you are as a person and who I am as a person is I don't want to be out in front of a bunch of people. Like, I don't want to be out late at night. Like, I don't want to haul stuff around. I just want to sit here and write new songs and put them on the internet, and then people can listen to them. So
Right.
knowing what you want to get out of it is important, I think.
So would you say that you are an ever evolving creator?
Yeah. Yeah, I would say so. Because uh I'm just always thinking about the next thing. And that's the way my podcast came about was 6 years ago, I was sitting in my studio and I go, I have all the stuff to do a podcast. I go, what would it be on? Well, I love philosophy, so I guess that. And that's
Okay.
how I started my podcast, right? It wasn't this intentional thing that I started out with. It was just kind of messing around, you know. And that's the way a lot of things have gone for me is just tinkering, just messing around, just trying something new and not being afraid to fall on your face or fail, just brushing yourself off and keep trying. So
Right.
yeah, I'm always trying to do something a little bit different.
And with your music, did you set up your own publishing company, or did you just submit it to ASCAP or BMI for publishing? How did you structure yourself?
Yeah, so it's all self-published. Um, so yeah, if you go on to Apple Music or Spotify or wherever and you go to download my stuff, it'll say from Joel Bouchard, So yeah, it's all independent.
Got you. And have you set yourself up as a business in terms of your music at all?
I haven't. I should. My wife keeps getting on me about it because she does all of our finances, and she's like, "Hey, you bought a guitar. Should I log this as a business expense?" Yeah. Well, maybe you should get on that LLC. I go,
Right.
yeah, I probably should. So if there's anybody from the IRS listening, don't hit me for it. But yeah. So I'm still working on it, but yeah, that's all
Okay.
independent like that.
Got you. And the reason I was going in that direction is because a lot of times um, with the podcast, I'm talking to other people who are musical artists and have done different things throughout their musical careers. But I wanted to get that information out for those who may be listening to this and be trying to figure out, all right, what do I do to move forward with my music career? What's the thing that I want to do?
Yeah.
And
Ye-
structurally get that in place.
Yeah, you should check with somebody else because like I'm the worst because I never cared about making money on any of this stuff, Like
Okay.
I just like doing it for the fun of it. So I've made enough money that it supports the hobby, right? I have enough that I can buy guitars based off of my music sales, buy my drum set, new computers, upgrades, that type of thing.
Okay.
Um, but it probably could be a lot better if I set it up right. Podcast, same way. The podcast actually, I just do it because I love doing it, right? I do it for fun. And so I love doing guest interviews like this because I love having good conversations. And on one I had a couple months ago, it's the pre-show talk. So the lady's getting to know me and she goes, "Hey, congratulations on being in the top 5% of podcasts worldwide." I had no idea I was, right? Because I don't pay attention to the stats or anything. And she goes, "Well,
Right.
you're monetizing, right?" I go, "Well, I've gotten 3 or 4 emails from people asking me to run ads, but no, I don't run ads because I don't want to interrupt the conversation." She goes,
Right. Right.
it's another one of those times where I was on a podcast about podcasting. And this was just a couple weeks ago. And the guy says, man, you've got a lot of people at home just shaking their heads because here, you have fallen into your lap a podcast that's really successful that you could make money off of, and you're not.
Yeah.
And I go, it's just not what it's about for me. Like I would rather have the conversation intact than run commercials or anything like that. And music's the same way, right? I'd rather do something for fun. I guess I'm just not as money driven. And that's not a knock on anybody. I would encourage anybody who wants to do music for a living, wants to do podcasting for a living, to really research and figure that stuff out. But that stuff is just, it's not interesting and it's not fun to me. So I've never done it. I only do the fun parts.
Well, hey, if you're doing what you love and it's satisfying to your soul, realistically, that's all that matters.
It
Right?
really is. It really is because I mean, that's the way I've kind of designed my whole life. Even my day job and stuff. I always just try to not do something that I don't want to do.
Yeah.
And if you're kind of living your life making those decisions, then you end up being happy. And I can really honestly say that, whether it's music or podcasting or my job or my wife, my friends, whatever it is. I have a great time. I love it because I don't want to put up with anything that is bringing me down.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. That's a tremendous capacity to have that mindset, um, and it takes a special person to be able to think that way, because it's very easy, especially in the creative world, to always be striving for something that a lot of times is unattainable for most, right? Um, being being that rock star on the stage touring the world is few and far between in terms of how many people try to get there and how many people who have the talent, literally, but for whatever reason, it's just not in the cards for them. So the fact that you are in a space and a position to be able to create just for the love of creating with no concern if you make $5 or $15,000, that's a tremendous mental state to be in. And
Yeah. Yeah.
it's something I want to highlight for the audience.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that, there's a lot of mythologizing around success that people buy into. And it doesn't even matter, right? In music, like you said, it's this rock star type of thing. But like you just have to think about the whole picture, right? Behind the scenes. Like imagine traveling 50 weeks out of the year, and what
Yeah.
your family life would look like. And then like you were saying, you could have all the talent in the world, but there's other things that go into it. There's
Yeah.
there's an element of luck, there's an element of connections, right? There's an element of just being good looking. There's all kinds of stuff that goes into being successful that is outside of your control, right?
Yeah.
And that's not just only true of music, it's true of everything else too. Lots of times when people are looking for jobs, they're always looking at, well, where am I going to get paid the most, right? To me, I go, man, what does getting paid the most matter if you're going to spend a third of your life just being miserable because you work at a terrible place?
Yeah.
So yeah, always trying to put that your welfare first, right? That they talk about work-life balance, but I don't even think it's work-life balance, right? Work is part of your life. So you just want it to be something that you enjoy doing that doesn't kill you.
For sure. For sure. Yeah. If you can keep your mindset balanced, I think that's probably 90% of success is
Yeah.
having that mindset balance. Um, and then everything else from there is just kind of uh, periphery.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd say so.
With being in the military for the amount of time, did you experience any battlefield situations that you had to go into, or was it just strictly your reserve type situation?
Yeah, so at the time, I remember going to basic training and the drill sergeant saying, look around, like every single one of you is going to end up overseas before your contract is over. So I was prepared for that, inevitability. And when I got to my reserve unit, at that point in time, tail end of the Iraq War, they were still, every unit was deploying every 5 years. And so with a 6 year contract, you're pretty much guaranteed to get deployed.
Yeah.
But my unit was brand new. And so what happened was when our time came up to get deployed, there wasn't enough people in our unit to go. And so we got kicked to the next schedule. So I
Oh,
never ended
wow.
up going anywhere. There was a point in time where because of the tensions with North Korea, I had to
Mhm.
have my bag packed at my house. And if they called me up, I had 72 hours to get to the drill station to go to South Korea.
Okay.
But nothing ever ended up happening with it. So, nope, it was all peacetime stuff. I had some fun combat training, right? Got trained in hand to hand combat, got trained, fought with the pugil sticks, which are the giant cotton swabs.
Yeah.
Got to shoot chalk rounds at people, laser, high tech laser tag, do all the combat training, but no, never actually saw anything.
Okay. With that combat training, did that and again, I'm looking across your entire storyline so far. Did that stimulate the mind for you to the point where you're like really engaged in doing that training, or was it a little bit arduous?
No, no, there's really no choice for it to be stimulating, I guess is the best way to put it, right? Because the army does a very good job of making the things feel very real. So,
Yeah.
for instance, with the hand-to-hand training, it's not just getting shown moves, right? They'll show you the moves and then they'll have you pair up and then you guys fight each other, you
Yeah.
actually fight. And so, your blood's pumping. Or with the chalk rounds, the chalk rounds was actually crazy because they built like a whole mock village
Yeah.
and they fill it up with smoke and they fill it up with enemy combatants and with civilians. And so, so our team's getting ready to go in. We have it all picked out who's going to be who. I'm going to be the team leader. We got this guy that's going to do this and the other thing. We get up to the entrance, and the sergeant who's running it goes, "Okay, well, you're going to be the team leader, and you're going to be this guy." So they threw off our whole plan. So now I'm rear security. So as we go into this town, and the other guys are clearing houses, like I'm watching their back in the street, and there's civilians walking up to you and you're getting shot at, and all this other stuff. And we got to the last place and it was at the corner of a courtyard. And so it was at the end. So they sent everybody at us. They had like 10 guys shooting at me from across the courtyard while my whole team's in a building. So I'm behind a 55-gallon drum just pinned down.
Holy
And
cow.
my guys all come out and they start exchanging fire, but essentially my whole team gets killed and I had to evacuate through this city through this village to the end, so I was the only one that survived. And yeah, the whole time your blood is pumping and you're fogging up the visor of your helmet and it feels very real.
Yeah. What was that like from a mental standpoint of knowing this is potentially a real world situation? And I just saw my entire group get eliminated, basically. And I've got to extract myself as well. What is the mindset in that type of situation?
Yeah, it's pretty wild because going in, all the sergeants are telling you, it's just like paintball, it's just like paintball. It's not, because what they do is you're still using your M16, they just replace the bolt. And
Yeah.
so this thing is shooting like 10 times faster than a paintball gun and it's chalk. So we were watching guys come out before we went in and their arms are purple and there's blood streaming down them and stuff. So you didn't want to get hit. You really didn't want to get hit.
Yeah.
So then to go in, yeah, and watch your guys get hit, right? And, watch them going down. Now, like the thoughts in your mind, oh man, like I'm super outnumbered. I have no help. As I'm starting to work my way back through these streets, I don't know who's going to pop around the corner, that type of thing. So, and then, even after that, with how smoky it is and with the different people, you're shooting and you're going, oh man, I don't know if I really got him or if he's just waiting to draw me out, So
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? You don't do a lot of thinking. And that's why military training is the way that it is because they're training you not to think, but to react. And so they really ingrain all this stuff in you so that when the rubber hits the road, you know what to do without having to think about it. And so it did, it kicked in. My gun jammed a couple times. I was able to clear out the jam without having to think twice about it, kind of go through all of the different things that you've learned. Um, but yeah, there's a little bit of fear in the back of your mind, but for the most part, it's just doing what you've been trained to do, right? Doing what
Right.
you have to do.
That muscle memory is kicking in.
Yeah, yep.
Okay. Did you attain any level of leadership in the time frame that you were enlisted?
Yeah. So I became a team leader. Um, they wanted me to go to sergeant school, but I knew that I wasn't going to be re-enlisting. I knew 6 years was going to be enough. So I said, I'm not going through sergeant school. But yeah, as a team leader, so each there's a squad, and the squad leader is normally a sergeant, and then in each squad you normally have two teams. So I was one of the team leaders, so I had three people under me.
Okay. So again, you're being recognized for your ability of leadership and being accelerated into one of those positions.
Yeah, and probably some of that was because I was a little bit older, 23, 24.
Gotcha.
A lot of other people come in there 18, but
Yeah. Okay. What, knowing that you're about to get out of that environment and out of that contract, what is your mindset in terms of, all right, I'm going to have to do something else because this is going to be done and I'm going to be finished with it. What is your mindset at that point, thinking of what you want to do when you exit?
so because it was reserves, and I was just doing a weekend a month and a couple weeks in the summer, I already had another full-time job, and it's where I currently work. Um, so I knew I was sticking with that. So really, it was just a relief, I was just waiting. I go again, it's been fun, but it's also been arduous, and I'm ready for it to be over. So when it was over, it was one of those things where you just breathe a sigh of relief, that it's finally passed. And again, like I said, you realize that, man, it's going to be really hard to have a bad day after this because I've had some real bad times, you know. So yeah, it was mostly relief. There wasn't a whole lot, um, there wasn't a whole lot of looking back going on after that.
Okay. And when you mentioned those hard times, when you had those hard times, was there something that specifically allowed your mind to get you through those bad times? Because the way that you said that kind of indicated to me that it was a little bit extreme for you
Hmm.
when you had those experiences.
Yeah, yeah. Basic training was rough. I had a drill sergeant who he was a combat vet and he was getting out soon and he didn't care. He told us right up front. He said, "Listen, I'm gonna be really hard on you, and you'll thank me for it later." And half of my platoon didn't end up graduating. Like, they end up
Oh,
dropping out or getting kicked
okay.
out, that type of thing. Because he was just really, like I said, you know, you're supposed to sleep for a certain amount each night. But he'd come in the middle of the night, make us wake up, do push-ups for a few hours, go back to sleep.
Oh, geez.
At every meal, we served the food, and he was purposefully not ordering enough food for everybody. And so we'd have to serve all the other platoons, and then afterwards we'd get to eat whatever was left. And usually it was like a spoonful of rice, a couple leaves of lettuce, a little piece of meat. Um, and then he just had us running around, was constantly, attacking us with obviously simulated rounds and things. But
Yeah,
so for 10 weeks, 2.5 months, you're sleep deprived, you're starving,
yeah.
you're just in this really bad state. And so in that case, what gets you through that is just keeping the horizon in mind. Like it's only
Right.
10 weeks. It's not that long. I can do anything for 2.5 months.
Yeah.
Um, Afterwards, when you get out and you have the 6 years still sitting in front of you, it's easier. It's much easier than basic training is. But um, you're still gonna have rough times. But I think that it's easier then to um, to get through those times with the soldiers that you're with. There's really some group cohesion where you know that no matter how hard you're working or how rough training is that day, at the end of the day, you're going to go back and everybody's going to be in the same boat and you can all commiserate about it. You can all, kind of complain and you can support each other in the trainings so I think that those are the kind of the two things. If it's short term and it's really intense, just keeping in mind the fact that it is short term. And if it's long term, but it's not as bad, then you just look at the people that you're going through it with, and you kind of help each other out and help each other make sense of it a little bit. But
Right, for sure. With getting the job that you have before you get out of the military, was it a job that was in a creative field, a field that you were interested in going to, or was it just an opportunity scenario?
it was just an opportunity scenario. Um, but I think that again, this comes back to some of the important things of about mindset and perspective,
Yeah.
where I've always been somebody who's just really curious. So I got a job, like I mentioned, there's not a whole lot around here, not a whole lot of opportunities, right? But
Hmm.
there's a factory that makes um, injection rubber molded parts. So mostly stuff for like the power grid. So if you're driving on the road, stuff you see on top of the utility poles, and safety products, respirator masks, head straps, that type of thing. So after getting back from basic training, not wanting to go back to McDonald's, I said, okay, well, I'll start here. So I started there as an operator, and it was one of those things where, again, I picked it up pretty quick, and I was just curious about stuff. Hey, what kind of steel is this mold made out of? What kind of rubber is this? What's the difference between this rubber and that kind of rubber? Hey, that's kind of a cool looking part. Can I learn that at some point?
Yeah.
And within a year and a half, I'd learned how to run every part in the building, right? And so went from being second shift operator to a second shift supervisor. And then a couple years later, got moved into the office to do um, inventory control and scheduling. And then a couple years after that, got made the production manager. So that's what I do today is I kind of run the whole business. I do production and safety and shipping and receiving and personnel, all that different type of stuff.
Wow. You you've been able to excel at everything that you've done. And interestingly, as well, a lot of the things that you've done that have been creative, you haven't really looked to try and monetize that in a way that most do because it's something you love. Um, it's amazing the mindset that I'm seeing that you have navigating across multiple industries, fields, experiences, military, even, um, and having this mindset that is it's shifting in a way of curiosity. It's shifting in a way of bettering yourself and getting to a place that is where you're feeling that the level is where you want to be. It's very fascinating. When did the idea of studying psychology come across your radar?
Yeah. So it was interesting, right? So my associate's degree was in criminal justice. And when I was getting that degree, you have all of those prerequisites you have to get out of the way.
Yeah.
And one of the classes I took was philosophy. And I didn't really know what it was about at the time. But I took it anyways. And the teacher was just this super dynamic guy that really had let the students um, have discussions and debates and talk about things. And I loved it. It was great. Um, and so after that, when I got out of, well, when I was still in the army and I was starting to use my free money for school, um, there's what's called yellow ribbon schools, right? So they'll cap your tuition at a certain rate to make things cheaper. Um, but philosophy isn't a program that is real profitable, so not a lot of places have it, right?
Yeah.
So my thought process is kind of like, well, what's the next best thing? Like, what's close to philosophy? And I came up with psychology, right? Because psychology, the study of consciousness or the human brain, how we make sense of the world, to me that was the most philosophical um, sort of subject matter that there was. So that's kind of when it crossed my radar. I go, I can't really find a program in philosophy, so I'll go with psychology instead.
Okay. And within that study, what are some of the things that have been very interesting to you that have really stood out the most?
Man, there is so much. It would
Okay.
almost be easier if you asked me about like a specific thing because each one is wild. We don't realize how much of the way we experience the world is just not the way we think it is.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and so I'll give you an interesting example, right? One of the studies they had um, a year, maybe 2 years ago, was they were following pupil movement in people who were looking at a picture of a bumblebee on a leaf. And what they discovered by tracking the pupil movement was that the eye was moving too fast for the brain to make sense of what was being seen.
Mm,
And so they kind of discovered through that seeing is really a lot of inferring what's around you, less so than identifying it, right?
yeah.
So when you look at something, you're looking at usually very specific details in your line of focus, and then everything else you're just kind of making up, right, based off of context clues and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that was a fascinating thing. But yeah, there's so many of them, so many things that are just really interesting.
Okay. So with that perspective, then me trying to ask you more specific questions rather than the broad spectrum of what is fascinating to you. Most of your life, you've grown up in this religious and faith-based environment, and went to military and experienced a whole range of, I would assume, backgrounds that probably did not align with that type of upbringing as well. And then switching into psychology, is there a specific thing within psychology that you can correlate to faith in your life?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. Um, yeah, I mean, faith is I don't know. It's not that's not one I've looked into much, but I think that it's usually, you're drawing on experiences from your past, you
Yeah,
know,
yeah,
like if I were in a bad situation, I couldn't really pray to a Hindu god that I've never heard of, right?
yeah,
The thought wouldn't even cross your mind. So
right.
there's certainly things that are deeply rooted in your background, in your past that go with you. Um, but then what faith is, right, at another level, I'm guessing it's probably the intersection of several different personality traits, right? What your need is for cognitive closure, right? Whether you can sort of stomach ambiguity, not having answers to questions, or whether you need answers and you
Right.
want to have a story, a narrative to explain it, that type of thing.
Yeah.
How curious you are, that type of thing. So I'm guessing there's probably a psychological profile based off of personality traits that interacts with your early experiences that sort of um, manifests that way. But even if it manifests that way, right, that all sounds really cold and calculating. And I don't mean it to sound that way, right? One of the things on our philosophy show, right, we we never bash anybody's faith. Reason being because you can't prove that any one faith is true or false, right? Like
Yeah.
there's no scientific evidence I could summon to prove Christianity or Islam or the flying spaghetti monster or prove them wrong either,
Yeah.
right? All of that stuff is outside of the realm of empirical inquiry. So it's all personalized stuff, you know. So we don't bash people for whatever they happen to believe in. But just talking about the mechanism of what's going on in the brain, that'd be my best guess. Is it has something to do with how different personality traits interact and what sort of upbringing people have had.
Right. And as a middle child, how does that play out for you? Because we know, for the most part, if you're familiar with birth order, middle child is always the one who is kind of, he does, and he or she does kind of whatever they feel like they want to do. They're kind of their own path, their own leader. They go through life navigating that way. Um, Third child is usually the baby, the one that's taken care of the most. It's always, gets a lot of attention. First child is always, required to step up because they're the firstborn. They've got to do this, they've got to do that. As the middle child, having the mindset that you do, have you seen elements within your studies of psychology that reiterates how you think on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, you nailed the birth order effect research pretty well. And honestly, I think it plays out pretty well in my family dynamic, right?
Okay.
Yeah, my brother, he in from his young through his teenage years was uh, very hot-headed, very, emotional. And
Yeah.
then when he grew into an adult, he became very stoic and very responsible and yeah, always trying to step up. And my sister, yeah, I mean, she's 33 years old now. She'll still go over to my mom's and just kind of throw herself on the couch and ask her to make her a sandwich and stuff. So mom's still mom, even though she's 74, and we should
Yeah.
start thinking about taking care of her rather than the other way around.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm very different from both of them in that way, right? So yeah, my brother plays instruments as well. Um, but he's never recorded anything. He he's never written any of his own music that I'm aware of, anything like that.
Okay.
Um, and yeah, my brother and my sister, neither one of them are in leadership positions or did anything. I don't think anybody besides my grandfathers were in the military. So yeah, in terms of being a middle child and kind of going your own way, doing your own thing, I think I fit that mold pretty well.
Okay.
The question I guess would that's interesting, right, is the middle child is normally the rebel for that reason, right? The
Yeah.
firstborn child is normally the one that kind of takes up the mantle that's passed down from the parents,
Right.
and the middle child goes the other way.
Yeah.
And that's the one where I'm not sure if it plays out that way, right? Because I think that my brother was so hot-headed and so rebellious when he was a teenager,
Yeah.
that there's so much fighting that I kind of flew under the radar and have just always been kind of nice and easygoing. That I sort of cultivated a closer relationship with my mom, and maybe even my dad to some extent than the other two did. So yeah, going my own way and doing my own thing, yes, but being the rebel, not so much. It's sort of
Yeah.
a
Now,
weird dichotomy that way, but yeah.
yeah. No, I'm with you. I've seen that as well for sure. Yeah. You're you're not the rebel component. You are the individual that's moving in your own direction. Like,
Yeah.
people may label that rebel, being a rebel, but it, it's not the rebel with the derogatory terminology attached to it.
Yeah, I think that's a good way of putting it because I have had, you know, obviously doing podcasting and publishing music and publishing books and that type of thing. I've gotten feedback and most of it is overwhelmingly good, which is great. But there are people every once in a while that want to give some negative feedback. And I think that they're always shocked by the response that they get from me. because most of the time it's to agree with them.
Yeah, yeah,
That sucks. I go, yeah, I know it sucks. I wrote it. Like I I never said it was good. I just wanted to do it, so I did it, like it's. So I think um that's where the rebellious part kind of gets left in the dust. A lot of people will realize, oh, okay, so this guy published something like just because he likes making stuff, not because he thought that this was the be all end all or that he thinks he knows everything, right? I know that I don't know anything, and I'm all right with that.
yeah,
Um, but yeah, it makes it hard to make enemies if you're usually on their side, right? Because like I mentioned, I love doing new things, and part of doing new things is just constantly messing up and failing, right? So if
right.
you're constantly messing up and failing, then you know that that's part of who you are. And it's interesting what you were saying, how have I succeeded at everything that I've done? Yeah, eventually, right? And
Yeah.
sometimes that comes very fast, and sometimes it requires making a lot of mistakes. But as long as you're always doing something new, making mistakes is always fresh in your mind, so you don't take yourself too seriously.
And again, that's a fantastic perspective to have that many, many could take notes on. Um, and one of the things that I try to convey to, especially to creatives, is to fail fast and fail often, because that helps develop that mentality that you have, that you're willing to go ahead and fail just because you're curious, right?
Mhm. Yeah,
I've
yeah,
had,
and
go ahead.
I've, I have a lot of friends who, have been doing music as long as I have, and they've never put anything out, or they've put one thing out. And sure, that one song is like way better than anything I've ever done, but it's one song.
Yeah.
And I go, man, I'm sitting here, I've got 5 albums and a bunch of EPs and a bunch of singles. And they go, man, I don't know how like, you never get writer's block? I go, no, I have more ideas than I know what to do with. I've got a notepad in my phone for podcast ideas, song ideas, book ideas that I'll never have enough time in my whole life to get to. Having
Yeah.
ideas isn't the problem, it's having the time to execute them. You know, but that's the thing, is in the execution, I don't worry about whether it's perfect or not. And yeah, some of the early stuff is kind of ugly. But it's also a snapshot of where you were at that time. I listened back to my first album or my first couple singles or whatnot. And I was telling somebody on another podcast that I basically go through a cycle, right? I'll release something and I'll be super excited about it. And then a year or two later, I'll be really embarrassed or upset. I'll go, man, like, why did I do that? I could have done it this other way. But then, like 4 or 5 years later, when I revisit it, I go, man, I remember exactly what it was like to be that way at that point in time, at that point in my life. And I wouldn't trade it for anything. So yeah, I love, yeah, just put stuff out, because art's all subjective anyways. Like there's no criteria on what's good and bad. Like just put your stuff out, just get it out there. Like you said, fail fast, fail hard. You know, it's never going to be perfect. It's never going to be perfect. So just
Right.
continue to learn, continue to have fun with it. And as long as you continue to learn, continue to have fun, you'll continue to get better and you'll never run out of ideas, because writer's block comes from not trusting your ability to accomplish it. And you can always accomplish music. You can always accomplish it as long as you're having fun, as long as you're doing new things. So,
Absolutely. Absolutely. With this degree that you're uh, attaining and eventually here, and I would assume pretty shortly, do you have an idea of what you want to do with that moving forward? Is it anything specific, or is it just a broad spectrum at this point?
yeah, we'll see. I mentioned getting the associate's degree in criminal justice, and then the next degree I got was a bachelor's degree in interdisciplinary studies with concentrations in criminal justice, education, and psychology. And I just did that one for fun. And then I finished it and I go, oh, well, I want to keep going. So I got a master's degree in education. I go, and that was just for fun. But I said, yeah, I kind of want to keep going. And so then I started a PhD in psychology, and it's just for fun. But now I'm getting to the point where I'm going, well, maybe at the end of this, rather than it just being for fun, maybe I do something with it. I don't know. So I've I've been looking at different options, and I think a lot of it will depend on, a lot of it depends on what the dissertation's about and how well executed it is and how it interacts with your other background and things. So there
Yeah.
um, might be an ability to change, change route. But I don't know. I'm not too committed yet. Like I said, I love my job. It's been really good to me. But I'm also not afraid to try new things, not afraid to go in a different direction. So we'll see where the wind takes me when the degree is done. But as of right now, just for fun.
Right. Okay. One of the things that we mentioned earlier on, when we were talking about your music and purchasing instruments and stuff, you said that your wife was asking you, all right, how are we going to categorize this, um, in terms of taxes and stuff like that. How has it been for you having a partner, having a family of your own, and still having the mindset of doing all of these things for fun? Is there any conflict there that arises?
Not really. No. Yeah, my wife is really supportive of all my hobbies, and there needs, I think that more important than anything, there just needs to be clear expectations. I think that's what I've learned over the years. So we've been married, that'll be 14 years in November, and
Congrats.
still learning that. You know, she doesn't have any problems with me doing stuff, but I just have to let her know, what it is. Because if I go, oh, okay, well, yeah, I'm in a podcast. She's gotten to the point now where she goes, well, is it a half an hour, 2 hours? I go, oh, okay, yeah, it's this one's a 2 hour one or whatever.
Yeah.
Or yeah, I'm gonna work on a song. Well, how long are you gonna be working on it for? Oh, well, what do you need me for? Well, we've got this thing. I'd like you to be at this thing at that we're going to at 5. Okay, well, I'll tie it up by 5. So having those clear expectations is really all it takes. Because if you don't have good communication, then you can get burned a little bit. But as long as that's
Yeah.
in place, she's really been fantastically supportive of everything that I've done. So it's been nice.
That's great. That's great. Again, that's a fantastic point for the audience. For anybody that's in a relationship, to understand the clear communication part is key and essential. It, whether it's a love relationship, whether it's a friendship, any type of working relationship, however close it is, clear communication and constant communication is essential. And
Yeah.
again, I want to just highlight another characteristic that you have that's phenomenal.
Yeah, I can't take credit for that one. That's her. Because again, I'm somebody who's quiet. I like to keep to myself. I like to, play in my room doing different stuff. Um, but she's always forced it. I remember early on, like being kind of annoyed with it, like, why are we always talking about stuff? Why are we always doing this? But now I'm getting to the point, I'm getting a little bit older, and I've seen the struggles that we had early on and the struggles that we don't have anymore. And I go, nah, she knew all along. She knew what she was doing. It's always good to have everything pretty clearly laid out so that, you know, when you find out real quick, it doesn't matter how long you've been married, you can't read the other person's mind. So you do have to actually say it out loud and have the conversations.
For sure, for sure. What is the next musical project that you got that you're working on that you think is going to be really exciting to put it out?
Yeah. So when I started my musical journey, I was doing alternative rock stuff. And then I transitioned. And over the past few years, I've done a lot of lighter, um, like I said, kind of dream pop, sort of mixing jazz chords into rock structure type thing.
Okay.
And I'm looking forward to next getting back into the heavier side of things. And so I want to go heavier than I've gone before. So I bought a metal guitar and I bought a new electronic drum set that has a double kick, has another extra crash cymbal, extra tom. So I want to do I've done one progressive uh EP before. So it was a 20-minute long song. but I would like to do like an actual progressive progressive metal album, something that's heavy and just kind of long. So we'll see. It'll probably, I'm starting my dissertation for my PhD in the fall, and I have to
Okay.
stay continuously enrolled. So it'll probably be a year and a half or 2 years where I'm not doing anything else. Um, but when the 2 years are up, or however long it is, that'll be my first project, is trying to do a progressive metal album. So
Gotcha. Gotcha. Have you decided what your dissertation is going to be on?
yeah, I just got the topic approved actually.
Okay.
Um, so what it will be looking at is how um, it's a little bit hard to explain. So how cognitive need for cognitive closure and trait curiosity influence a person's perception of artificial intelligence output due to ambiguous prompts. So to break it down, need for cognitive closure, we talked about that a little bit already. That's
Yeah.
somebody's how much they need answers and how little they can stand ambiguous situations.
Yep.
Trait curiosity is how curious somebody is by nature. So those two things are kind of opposed. Usually, if you're curious by nature, you're okay with ambiguous
Yeah.
situations. You don't really need answers. It's not too important to you. Whereas if
Right.
you need answers, you can't stand anything that's gray. It has to be black and white. You tend not to be super curious by nature. Um, so basically, testing people on those things, and then um, prompting AI like a chat GPT with a question that doesn't have an answer. So something like, hey, chat GPT, interpret this dream for me, or what's the meaning of life, or something like that.
Yeah.
And then seeing what its response is, and then showing it to people, and then asking them a set of questions such as, how accurate do you think this is? How much do you trust it? Would you ask follow-up questions, right? And then assessing how much they have trait curiosity versus how much they have a need for cognitive closure, and seeing how those things interact, right? And I'm
Yep.
not sure what the answer will be. And that's why it makes a good study, right? If you know what the answer is going to be, then it's not really all that
Yeah. For
all
sure.
that
For sure.
important. But yeah, so that's the direction that it's heading.
Very fascinating. Again, from my perspective, because I understand each one of those elements that you're going to be talking about, and I hope that it works out well for you, and you get to a conclusion of where it's so profound that it allows you to move into a field where you get to do what you love, but also change the minds and hearts of others.
Yeah, that's what I'm hoping too, right? Because when it came time to pick a topic, what a lot of the professors, well, first off, I did the whole degree program wrong, because they tell you,
Why?
yeah,
Why would it
first
be
off,
otherwise?
yeah, first off, most people who are getting a PhD in psychology, they got their associates, bachelor's, and master's in psychology. If you remember, I didn't get any of them in that. So
Yep.
my master's degree is in education. So when I tried to get into the psychology program, get with the PhD, they made me jump through a bunch of hoops. I had to take entrance exams, I had to write essays, I had to do all this stuff to prove that I knew enough about psychology to get into the program.
Okay.
Okay, so I do. Then when I get into the program, they say, okay, well, each class that you take, even though the class is on a different topic, it'll have an assignment where you should do like the major assignment on the topic that you plan on doing your dissertation on, because they kind of build together to train your skills. Well, I said, no, I'm not going to do that. I said, there's too many things I want to know about. So every class, every main topic, I'd study a different thing. I wanted to learn all about psychology, so I studied all kinds of different stuff. So now, there it's time to do the PhD. I'm going, okay, well, I'm a little bit behind the eight ball. And on top of that, they say, do your dissertation. They said, what you really want to do is just find a little niche. You want to look at something that's very well researched that everybody else has already looked at. And then you want to find something that's just a little bit different and do it on that. And that's how you do it. So what I'm doing has never been done before. Nobody's ever looked at it. And
Right.
so I actually had to clear it with the chair of the program. I emailed her up. I said, listen, like, they say that you're just supposed to look at something that's well studied and do a little tweak something. I said, what I'm doing, I've never seen these three things studied together. I'm like, is
Right.
it still okay to do that? She said, yeah, it's okay, but it's going to be hard. You're going to have to do a lot of exploratory, research and a lot of bridging some gaps. So I said,
Yep.
oh, I'm up for the challenge. I'll give it a go. So yeah, the whole thing has been a bit of it's going to be a bit of a challenge, but I really think that based off the fact that I can't find a single study that's looked at the three of them before, I'm hoping it will change the field a little bit, and if it does, all three of those things are very interesting to me too. I love messing around with AI. I'm somebody who has a lot of curiosity, somebody
Yep.
who, like you were talking about earlier, based off of my faith upbringing and all this other stuff, this need for answers is something that has always fascinated me. So putting the three together to do something new, and then possibly having that leverage into a career field where I can look into that type of thing uh, as a job would be great. But we'll see where it goes.
Yeah. I've been working with a lady who has been using AI and developing uh, prompts targeted to self reflection.
Hmm.
And it's been very fascinating doing work with her and watching the stuff that she's doing with it. Um, and I can foresee it being used as a bridge within the mental health space to be able to get some understanding, get some open conversation and dialogue moving. And I think that I haven't really seen any other person doing that other than her in terms of that internal reflection component. So if you need somebody to pick their brain on in terms of some stuff like that, just let me know when you get to that
Yeah,
point.
yeah,
Uh,
sounds really interesting.
yeah. But again, this has been a fascinating conversation. I really appreciate you coming on, sharing your story, um, being curious, as well as being willing to just continue doing stuff that you love for no other reason than you love it. So thank you for that. And I think this is probably a great place for us to end for today. But I always want to remind the audience at the end of each episode to listen to your heart, but be kind to your mind.